Inside Black and Gold, Week 2 edition, heading into Dallas. Steve Geller, Jeff Nowak, and man, oh man, I know, Jeff, I think you've been out to Jerry's World before, but always an exciting stadium, at least. I got to go once as a sideline reporter, and just some of the best amenities you could find, at least.
I have not actually been to Jerry World. The Arlington Cowboys, I haven't had the pleasure of going out there yet, but I am excited. I said on the last episode, this is one of the few stadiums that I get to go to new this year, because there aren't that many. Last year was every road trip was new for me because I had only been to a couple of these stadiums.
That's awesome, right? Yeah. NFC South you get used to. Yeah,
whereas this year it's Kansas City, and I don't count the preseason. I've decided I'm not going to count the preseason as being to the stadium, right? Because you don't get the full environment unless you're actually at a game. So I'm not even going to count Arizona. I'm going to say I still haven't been to Arizona. Whereas so all I have is because we're going back to Green Bay, which is cool, but it'll feel like a different environment in Green Bay because it'll be a cold game.
Yeah.
So that'll be a thing. And then New York is one I haven't been to. Kansas City is one I haven't been to. I think that's it because we're going back to LA. That's obviously not new for me. But no. And yeah, so this week, I want to apologize in advance because this is probably the least prepared I have been for a podcast since we've been doing this. We're in year 3, but I've been all out of sorts. We obviously had a hurricane this week.
I was going to say there were some extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, you were hosting to 2 a.m. on Wednesday. How was that?
Yeah. Pretty brutal after midnight. Thankfully the impacts of Francine were minimal. And I think because most people kind of had their power, they were like, well, I'm going to bed. And so we didn't even get, very many folks calling in. And then also, after the midnight hour, a lot of the city leaders or parish leaders finally got some rest of their own. So it was kind of me, Charlie, and Ian Ozan hosting until 2 a.m.
Yeah, we lost power. The annoying thing is we didn't lose power during the storm, really. The storm was basically done at 9 o'clock. And then we lost power at 9:45. We were just about to go to bed because I'm old and I go to bed at 10 o'clock. And then Claire goes upstairs. I'm on my phone, about to go upstairs, and then everything goes off. And because I sleep downstairs when we lose power because it gets real hot real fast up on because we have a 2-story Camelback.
Yeah,
it's 10 degrees hotter within 20 minutes when you lose power because up here it's humid and 80 degrees.
So how long were you out for?
It's funny because I ended up because I couldn't sleep. That's the problem when you lose power here is just during the day, you're fine. You're sweating. Right. You're kind of gross. Trying to sleep in 78 degrees and humid. Oh God, it's brutal. So I probably slept 2 to 3 hours. And so the next day I was taking a nap at 10:30 I woke up and the power was back on. So
nice.
But then I lost power again later in the afternoon. It's back now. So we'll see. This whole city is kind of a mess, but so we're kind of all out of sorts. This is going to be a weird week for us. It's going to be a weird week for the Saints. They managed to keep their schedule as close to intact as possible. I talked about it in our last episode. The coaches kind of stayed later. Initially, DA said that they were going to stay at the facility. I think some, at least the local coaches, definitely got to go home in terms of how close do you live to the facility, right? Because I think they were done at some point in the afternoon. DA, for example, I believe he lives in Mandeville. So going over the causeway at 6 p.m., I think they closed it. I don't think it would have been able to get home, at least not that direction, which is the only direct route to Mandeville. So, but I know Clint Kubiak said that he was able to get home. I don't know where he lives. I think there's a couple coaches that live a lot closer to the facility. So maybe they were able to escape while others stayed overnight. But they made up that meeting time in the morning. They practiced a little later yesterday than normal on Thursday. Just for a note, we're recording this Friday morning. So we don't have any injury information from Friday yet. But so Friday is going to be back to their normal schedule. So that shouldn't be the excuse if things go terribly wrong in Dallas. Because that's what we're getting ready for right now is Saints-Cowboys in Arlington. They're flying out on Saturday as normal. It's their first road trip of the year.
Yeah, can't blame the storm for sure.
It's going to be a talking point, but I don't think that the storm, if they struggle, I don't think the storm is going to be the reason they struggle. Now, could be some reasons they struggle, and we'll get into some of that. We're going to hear from Ed Werder, who apparently, I didn't know this until this week, is a Cowboys reporter now. Obviously I had to double check, wait, this is the same Ed Werder from ESPN. Yeah, he doesn't work for ESPN anymore. Now he is a Cowboys insider. So
whatever with their cuts, I feel like he was definitely one of the ones that shafted. I always appreciated Werder's coverage.
Yeah, he was good. I like that Werder. He was there for a long time.
Right.
Like he's one of those guys that's like there's certain people you see on ESPN and you're just like whatever. Like he said, he'll just talks to talk. I always felt like Ed Werder when he had a report, it was like there was meat to
information.
It.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was on WWL this week. Normally we would try to have a Cowboys guest on. Just did not work out for whatever reason. We got to it late. I think that was the bigger issue was we started trying to book people late in the week as opposed to normally we would try to book people on like Tuesdays. But Tuesday was like full Francine. Wednesday was full Francine. And then by Thursday, it was like, well, this isn't happening. But we did have Ed Werder on WWL early in the week. So he's got some insight on the Cowboys. And we'll get into a few points. And then we'll do X Factors in the final segment as we typically would for these preview episodes. This was supposed to be our first kind of regular week of the podcast, and then it turned into this nonsense. Hopefully by next week we'll be on a regular schedule and we can kind of get to our normal preview stuff. But first, I was nervous yesterday because at about 3 p.m., give or take, those O'Keefe morons, the Project Veritas people that secretly record people that they like pretend to be on dates with, right? They tweeted that they had like a smoking gun about the Saints. And so it was like, oh man, because if you recall a couple weeks ago, the head of digital content for the Commanders, whatever, they recorded him, like they pretended to go on a date with him. Like they had someone like literally pose as she was a woman, but like pose as going on a date with this person and then secretly recorded him so that they could get undercover information about whatever. And he was just like talking shit about the players and I think he referred to NFL fans as high school educated alcoholics and mouth breathers and stuff like that, which like, okay. But like, it's just like a really kind of shady way to try to get some guy talking in what he believes is kind of a confidential setting and saying stuff that like, I don't know, who knows if he believes. I don't know if you've ever been on a date before, but some people will say shit to sound cool. And it's like, do we really believe it? Anyway, so They tweeted as if they had something on the Saints too. Like they also got someone from the Saints in that setting. And I was like, oh shit.
All right. Who's this going to be? Right.
Every team has dirty laundry. Every team has skeletons, whatever. So, and they released their first video right before Thursday Night Football or the opening game last week. And so this week they were like, oh, we got another one. And so I'm waiting all day like, oh man, who'd they get? It turns out it was just the same guy talking about the fucking pill mill scandal from like 2012.
Okay.
Pill mill is probably not the appropriate term for it, but you understand what I mean. Like they thought they were cooking.
The Vicodin stuff.
Yes, they thought they were cooking, but like we uncovered this thing with the Saints, and it was like, guys, this was a story back when it happened. This is just this idiot's opinion on how the NFL handled, because he was like, oh, the Bountygate thing wasn't really Bountygate. It was trying to, they just used that to basically punish Sean Payton for this other thing that happened, and it was like, yeah, we've been saying that. I was going to say, I was like, well, actually, I kind of believe that. So I don't know if it's so crazy. Right. I think that's kind of the understood, like anyone who is close to the situation would be like, yeah, they overreacted to Bountygate because this other thing was going on. And like, yeah, that's a thing. Everyone, like, we've been making jokes about that for 12 years at this point. They didn't bother to Google to be like, wait, do people know?
Yeah, we know.
It was just funny because it was like, oh yeah, you got him, you caught us, but also like, this is like, if anything, like no one on the Saints organization should feel like, oh man, this is really getting brought up again. Like, no, this is a Sean Payton should be like you should be saying this is a Sean Payton thing and this is an NFL thing. Like,
yeah, this is more like go ahead and talk to Sean in Denver. Definitely bullshit. Right. We don't have to deal with.
Their contention is that the NFL covered it up and punished Sean Payton for it, and also like, yeah, great. Of all the things that could have been that they could have like brought up, that was like the one where I was just like, wow, this is it. Like wasted my
got us.
Because I was like ready for like, well, what the fuck? Like what if someone comes out and says something crazy? And then it's
right, like Derek Carr ends up not being, this clean cut Christian guy, and all of a sudden you see him on a date, like trying to pick up a prostitute or something.
Well, right. Like, you don't know. It could be anything. Even if it's complete bullshit, it could be something you have to react to. And then it ends up being that. So, I was like, for a second,
you can have it, right?
I was like, why can't things be normal? And then, all right. Like, these guys are such idiots to begin with. Like, this is such a garbage way to try to report out news.
So I wasn't aware of this. Is this just someone they try to get in sports, or is it just famous people?
They've been doing it for years.
Okay.
Like, they did it with journalists for a while, where they try to like get them in the background saying stuff that's like they wouldn't report, because I don't know, that's how journalism works. Like, you get stuff on background that you're not allowed to report, but like you're having a conversation with somebody, you'll be like, yeah, this is how it is. But either way, I just thought it was funny because it was like they made it out to be this big thing, like, oh, the Saints should be, be careful, and then it ended up.
We know, right? Thank you.
And yeah, right. So I don't know. I just thought that was funny. But, getting more into the Saints, if you listen to the last episode, you heard me go off on about a 20-minute tangent about how power rankings are stupid and the analysis around this team is stupid, and everyone's doing their best to not give the Saints credit for beating another NFL team by 37 points by using the idea that, oh, it's just the Panthers that are bad. The Saints are as bad as we thought they were. The Panthers are just way worse.
Yeah, it's what they should have done to the Panthers. Anybody would.
And it's annoying to me because everyone a week and a half ago would have tried to convince you that the Panthers and the Saints are on the same level, if not the Panthers being ahead of the Saints. And it's just this odd desire to hate the Saints because they're not interesting to you and you don't like the head coach and you don't like the quarterback. And so that means they're bad. And in reality, it's like, that's not necessarily true. Like, you guys just don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, so I caught up with Tyrann Mathieu in the locker room this week because I'm curious. Like, I can have all these opinions on how I feel about it. I was curious if like the team kind of looks at that and uses that as motivation. So I asked Tyrann about it. This is what he said. I thought it was a good interview. When you have a big win like that, and the kind of resounding things like, oh, it was just the Panthers. Like, you hear that a lot. Do you use that? Is that something that you can use as motivation in terms of, like, obviously you don't want to listen to all the analysis or anything, but when it's, I heard a story about Michael Jordan would make stuff up almost to motivate himself because it was like no one's talking shit about Michael Jordan, but he has to believe that because that just gives him that edge. Is that something you can use? I'm just curious.
For sure, I think like for us, man, as players, like we don't disrespect, really any opponent. You know what I mean? And we know too, like, and you know as well, like, man, it's like, man, you could have a great team and it's still hard to do what we did Sunday. You know what I mean? But we do understand that, man, like we just in that position to where we have to continuously like prove that we could play with the big boys. I think, like if we're able to win this game this week, then next week it's going to be the same. Or can they beat the Eagles? You know what I mean? And so, yeah, man, like we just got to keep our head down and just keep doing what we're doing. Like, we know we're a good defense, but yeah, I mean, it's going to be those times in the season where like we got to prove that consistently.
And obviously, you were the Chiefs. You went to the Super Bowl. Is it easier or more difficult when everyone's giving you all the credit in the world versus when no one's giving you any credit? I'm just,
man. I think it's equally, difficult. Obviously, like when you're winning, like everybody wants you. Like everybody has a target on your back. And then it's like, when you're losing or you're capable of winning, it's like people find reasons to kind of dismiss, why you won. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think they're both like just different, like challenging places to be in.
Just one more question. So, how nice was it when you forced the fumble and it just happens to bounce right back into your arms like that?
Well, that's how it used to be. At least that's how I used to feel. And yeah, man, like I came into the season and I was like, man, like I always find myself getting intercepts, but like I think I had maybe like 7 forced fumbles, and I'm like, like how can I get to 40, 20, and 15 forced fumbles? You know what I mean? So like that was like an emphasis for me this season, was to like not just focus on catching picks, like find a way to punch a ball out. You know what I mean? So yeah, that was like a good like little confidence, little booster, momentum booster, because yeah, like I haven't forced one of those in a while. You know what I mean? So I know I had that one like 2 years ago on the goal line, but Sam Darnold, like, come on, man. Like, I don't even count that. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
I think it was Von Bell his last year here. It was like he had magnets on him or something. Yeah. Like every time a ball was on the ground, we'd just end up with him.
Yeah, I always tell my teammates, anytime y'all force a fumble or tip a ball, just make sure I'm the beneficiary.
Gotcha. I appreciate it. I appreciate Tyrann.
Yeah.
It's funny what you don't see there. And so Tyrann, these guys have meetings, right? And they know if they're late, they're going to get shit. And there's the excuse of, the media was asking me questions is not going to prevent a coach from reading them the riot act for being late for a meeting, right? And and some players will be a lot more vocal about like, I got to go, guys. I have a meeting.
Right.
Tyrann probably feels a little bit safer in that like he's Tyrann Mathieu and no one's going to give him too much grief for being a couple minutes late. But he also wants to answer every question that everyone has. And I always appreciate that about him. But it was funny at the end of that interview, he wouldn't tell me to stop asking the questions, but he was just like taking like a couple steps,
Right.
By the end, he was like literally walking away from me because he had a meeting to get to. But how was I supposed to know? He's just a great dude. Like I love Tyrann. There's one of the reasons I will never trash Tyrann is because I just feel like his value to that locker room is immense. Like a guy like Alontae Taylor, I don't think that people truly appreciate how impactful having a guy like Tyrann, like helping a young player like Alontae Taylor, not just on the field but off the field, like how to conduct yourself, where should you live, like how should you be, like it's impossible to quantify how helpful he is to those young players in that room and how important he is to those young players in that room.
It obviously helps when you can, obviously you're produce, you're not just talk.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like the reason I go to ask him these questions of is that a motivating thing when people aren't giving you any credit versus when they're telling you you're the best person, you're the best team on the planet, is because he's been on both sides of that equation. He knows he's been in every possible scenario of where a team is and where a team is trying to get to and where they're starting and when they're not getting any credit versus when you go into week one and everyone's saying you're the Super Bowl favorite. He's been on both sides of that equation. Right. So he just knows. And we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. He's dealing with a heel injury this week. I think it's something that he's been dealing with for a while. Wouldn't expect it to keep him out, but it's just funny when you talk about an Iron Man guy. He hasn't missed a game since he's been here, and it's not because he hasn't been hurt. It's because he's playing through injuries. But no, it's a whole thing, and we do have some injuries that you have to prepare for this week, and we'll get into that. But I think this defense this week, I need this defense to really stand up against a Cowboys offense that I don't know if they're as good as people are making them out to be. I genuinely don't. I don't think they played particularly well last week. And I think the Browns offense was just that bad. But we'll have to see. But either way, Tyrann, he's kind of the, when I look at this defense and I think okay, what's the identity of this defense? I look at Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, Cam Jordan. These are the guys that are kind of the heart and soul of your defense.
Yeah. And with Tyrann too, obviously being a Louisiana kid, it just means more to him here, which you got to love too. But you've mentioned, and I've said it before too, just you have that kind of leadership on all three levels of your defense. It's pretty freaking amazing. There's just, I don't know. I feel like there's so many more me guys than we guys nowadays. So it's nice to see and hear a guy like Tyrann, obviously. No, and he's not looking to give you that yearbook NFL standard answer either. Yeah,
no, he's going to actually answer your question. That's why he gets asked questions.
Right.
And it's to his credit, it's got to be kind of annoying when the second you start talking to someone in the locker room, it's going to be 20 minutes straight of, all the TV cameras are going to flock over, and then 3 other reporters are going to come over afterward, and your entire afternoon is now answering questions. But
no, that boot on the uniform for him, definitely, I feel, you can feel that means more.
Yeah, no question. A few other things. So we're heaping all the praise on Clint Kubiak, and you have all these play caller rankings graphics, and Pete Carmichael last year was always at the bottom of them in terms of value added. This year, through week one, Clint Kubiak is not only at the top of them, but by a wide margin. But not to be lost in that, Dennis Allen, they rank the play callers, the offensive and defensive play callers. The Saints had the top-rated offensive play caller, also the top-rated defensive play caller, and we'll see how that continues. If that continues this week against in a much more difficult matchup. Yeah. But one thing that I thought was interesting in week one is the Saints according to Pro Football Reference, which some networks, some outlets will have different totals of like how many blitzes you sent, this. They had the Saints as sending 15 blitzes. And by that, it's not always like, oh, you're sending Alontae Taylor on a slot blitz. Sometimes you're just lining up 5, you're sending 5 rushers and they're all down rushers, right? Like Willie Gay is a guy who will occasionally come on a blitz, but that's kind of your regular rush. But that's the highest number in the NFL, 15 blitzes in week 1. And that's significant because last year, they were middle of the pack. I think they sent 142 total, which is 22% of the time they sent a blitz. If that pace, 15 per game, would have, and that was 38.5%. And so they didn't even face that many defensive snaps to have that high of a number. They just blitzed a ton. That would be a pace to blitz 255 times, more than 100 more times this year than last year, which really doesn't make a ton of sense because you would think like, hey, the pass rush should be better this year with Chase Young. So I think that was really more game plan oriented than anything else. Is we felt like, hey, we can get pressure on Bryce. If we send that extra rusher, he's going to panic and we're going to win. And I think there's certain matchups where that works, certain matchups where that doesn't work. But I like to see a team that can do it both ways. I like to see a team that can generate pressure with 4 and drop against a quarterback. Like say, there's a reason you never blitz Tom Brady because he would make the blitz hurt. Some quarterbacks are going to be much better at making the blitz work against you than a young quarterback in Bryce Young. And like when Bo Nix shows up, I would bet money that you see a blitz rate closer to 38.5%. Whereas this week against Dak, I think you'll probably see a blitz rate closer to, I don't know, like the 20% that you had last year. So that's just going to be something to watch. But I do think when you see, okay, Alontae Taylor is really good at blitzing, maybe it's something you do a little more. So we'll see over the next few weeks. Because I think like we've seen Dak, when he's struggled, it's been because he gives you the ball. Like as good as Dak has been throughout his career, he's thrown some buck wild interceptions. And so I don't know, maybe getting a little extra pressure on him forces some of those errant throws, those bad decisions. We'll have to see. But I just thought that was an interesting number to see a team that feels like it has a really good 4-man pressure package suddenly sending the most blitzes in the NFL.
No, that's the biggest key for like week 2 here going in. How stout is that Cowboys front going to be? And yeah, I agree. Dak is more experienced, but he has that, in the past, we've seen him throwing plenty of bad balls before. So he doesn't concern me that much, but then definitely a lot more savvy than Bryce Young, who I felt like, man, I think he's psychologically damaged still from last season getting sacked. And it just started again for him again this year. So that boy's head's got to be spinning.
He's a mess. Yeah, he is a mess. I feel bad for him. And that's why when like you talk about, when I talk about, okay, you don't have to start every rookie quarterback, guys. Because like I don't think that you look at some guy, look at Sam Darnold, and how he was not ready to start in a bad situation. Sometimes you can throw a guy in if you have a really good situation for him and he can struggle and you might still win games. Look at the Bears, right? Like the Bears, I feel like put Caleb Williams in a scenario where he can struggle and the team can still succeed around him as he finds his way. Bryce Young was never in that situation. Sam Darnold was never in that situation. Zach Wilson was never in that situation. And I don't think these guys, like we looked at Zach Wilson in the preseason and you saw a guy who looked a lot more comfortable with the Broncos in a scenario where he doesn't have to carry that team.
Right.
Than I ever saw him with the Jets. And I just think like you don't do a quarterback any favors by saying, well, you're the number 1 overall pick, so you have to start right now. I don't care what the situation is around you. I don't care how dysfunctional everything is. We need you immediately, and we'll see what happens. And like, you're at a point where you might just have to quit on Bryce. Like, and it's not because he doesn't have talent. It's because you have completely undercut every ounce of confidence that guy could have possibly had. And now he's playing scared out there. Like we saw the clip of Sam Darnold saying, I'm seeing ghosts, right?
Right.
Like, you don't think Bryce is feeling that way? I don't know.
You could definitely, the whole sense of him is panic right now. And who's Carolina have this week? I'm trying to think. The Chargers?
That sounds right.
I'm pretty sure they're going to be getting after him too, because you could just see the indecision. Even when he had time to make, or there was somebody open, he still couldn't get that throw. And it was like, DA, give him credit. Obviously, he was in his bag that day. against Carolina. Definitely had Bryce's number.
Oh yeah. And once you see the the opening and you smell blood and you're just going after it, right?
Oh
and
yeah, right.
You never had a chance. It's funny because Dak is like one of the reasons you have to throw your young quarterback in there is because they point to Dak and be like, well, he did it. But like if you have the best run game in the NFL, you have the best offensive line in the NFL, life gets a lot easier. And that's what's going to be interesting this week is, okay, we're back to that Ezekiel Elliott offense. And I think the Saints, if they win this game, it's going to be because they shut down the run game entirely. And I don't think that you should feel like you can't, because there's no Tyron Smith there anymore. Zeke is like 5 years older than the Zeke that should be a threat to you. Like we saw this version of Zeke in New England last year.
Right.
You don't remember because he did literally nothing in that game, but he was there.
And after week 1, I'm glad Pollard's gone too. He looked pretty good.
Yeah, like what we got? Rico Dowdle, is that the guy we're got to be worried about? Yeah,
yes, exactly.
I'm not afraid of anyone named Rico Dowdle. He's tiny little man.
Hey, but watch out for Rico Payton.
Yeah, if I see Rico Payton tackle Rico Dowdle, all bets are off. One more note, and this will be talked about a lot throughout the game. Clint Kubiak, Mike Zimmer got that matchup.
Yeah,
Clint, not particularly a loquacious fellow. But he did get asked about going up against Mike, and this is that quote.
What kind of challenges does that present?
Yeah, great front, really good personnel, good in the secondary, well coached. It's just an elite defense in the NFL, so it'd be a big-time challenge for our players.
And what are just some of the hallmarks of Zimmer's defense and just some of the things that you think he does pretty well?
Physical, create turnovers. Really, all the anything you could say about a great defense, that's what he preaches. He's a heck of a coach.
Does being familiar with him help at all, or how does that impact things?
Yeah, definitely. Familiar with Coach Zim, and would love to say how grateful I am for Coach Zim for a lot of things. I really enjoyed my time working for him. Made me a better coach. But his defense is excellent. Got a really sound scheme. Really good coaches on his staff. Guys that have a lot of experience, and we have a big job to do this week, but we're just going to focus as much as we can on us, because I'm not trying to worry too much about them, just trying to get better at what we do, and I think that'll be really a main focus for us.
Have you kept up with him the last couple of years?
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean these Thursday Clint Kubiak press conferences are not exactly going to be appointment listening, and I mean, as long as things are going well, I don't mind it. If things start to go poorly, and it might grate on some people, because he is a non-answer man. He's just not going to give you anything, and you can respect it. Like there's no rule that you have to tell us stuff. You do have to talk to us. There is a rule that says you have to talk to the media, but there's no rule that says you have to divulge anything, and he certainly does not.
I feel like it's not because he's not an interesting or he's not a knowledgeable coordinator. I think he is so masterfully trained on saying nothing.
I think it's just his default setting. I think if you got him in like a one-on-one scenario, he would talk a lot more.
Some people like that for sure.
And maybe if James O'Keefe gets him on a date. But anyway, let's wrap that segment up. Just kind of a rundown kind of situation. We didn't really have any rudder of what that segment was supposed to be, but we're going to come back. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. I always forget to put your name up for these first segments. There you go.
I'm alive.
Yeah, you are here. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow Steve at Steve Geller WWL. We're getting ready for Saints at Cowboys. We're going to talk a little bit more about, what that matchup is going to be. Who are some of the X factors in that game? How are the Saints going to survive if they don't have their young stud left tackle, which is starting to look like they might not? We'll have to wait and see, but we're going to come back. We're going to hear from Ed Werder. We're going to get a little more into the weeds on what this Cowboys offense likes to do and whatnot. So this is Inside Black and Gold. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak sitting down with Mr. Steve Geller. He's back. He took his Francine hat off. Now he's back on the Saints hat. On the sideline, and I will be in Dallas. I guess no, that's a lie. I won't be in Dallas. I always say that as if like we're going to Dallas. We're not going to Dallas. we're going to like 20 miles west of Dallas or something like that. Like we're going to face the Arlington Cowboys, or as Bobby likes to say, the Cowgirls. And I don't know, like, it's easy to look at this Cowboys team and see this offensive juggernaut and like, oh, it's going to be a high scoring game. But I feel like we've been here before. And this Cowboys team feels like it's pretty similar to what it's been the last several times. Like I go back to like 2019 and 2018 and these matchups that the Saints have had against the Cowboys, and they never seem to be particularly high scoring. And I always go back to that Teddy Bridgewater game. And it's like, man, that's the same Cowboys team. Like the 3 Cowboys matchups the Saints have had since Dak has been the quarterback. You had a 13-10 Saints loss in Dallas. That was Drew Brees starting for the Saints, which is crazy that even any Drew Brees-led offense only scored 10 points in a game. I believe that was the game that Jalen Smith speared Alvin Kamara in the helmet and didn't get called.
Sir, that was my first year on the sideline, so I remember it well.
Yeah, and then Jalen Smith came here and apologized. No, that was Kentavious Street who apologized. I don't think Jalen even remembered it. But the next game was Teddy Bridgewater starting in that game where Drew Brees was hurt, and the Saints won 12-10. And then the game after that, Taysom Hill started. It was 27-17 Dallas, but like that was a low scoring game. It ended up kind of got away from him late, but that was not Dallas dominated this game either. So what I will say about the Saints-Cowboys matchups is Dennis Allen, for whatever reason, has always seemed to have a really effective scheme against what Dak Prescott and what the Cowboys are trying to do. And so hopefully that happens again. Because I just, as much confidence as the Saints probably have in their offense right now, or they were able to build on their offense in that Panthers matchup, I'm worried about the pass rush. I'm worried about the pressure from Dallas in this game, because I just think that can wreck everything you're trying to do.
I agree there. That's definitely the biggest thing with Dallas. They got a ton of talent on the defensive side of the ball. Mike Zimmer, like you mentioned, I think earlier, we're felt full aware of him from his Minnesota Viking days, and we've been
like on the flip side, like Zimmer always seemed to have the Saints number. Now it's a different offense now, so it's a little tough to measure. Of like, but he does know Clint pretty well,
and we know obviously him a lot because Sean Payton would constantly heap praises on him because they came up through the Cowboys organization together.
Yeah, no, he's a good defensive coordinator. Yeah. And like, just for perspective, the Saints had a pretty dominant pass rushing day in terms of affecting Bryce Young. He had 5 QB hits in that game. Now, Chase Young had a bunch of pressures and they forced a lot of throwaways and whatever. The Panthers didn't have a ton of extended drives. The Cowboys against the Browns, they had 17 QB hits against Deshaun Watson. Now, Deshaun Watson, I don't even know if his offensive line is blocking for him anymore. Like, I kind of feel like that team is quitting on Deshaun Watson.
So Watson definitely needed a massage after the game.
Not touching that one with a 10-foot pole.
With anything. I'm not touching that at all.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not getting locked in the room with Deshaun Watson, put that way. But 17 QB hits, that's insane. You only run like 60-something plays in a game.
Yeah.
You're getting hit on like 20% of your, and not all those are throws. You run the ball. The Browns run the ball a lot. So like, how many dropbacks did you even have relative to, let me look. Let's see how many pass attempts Deshaun Watson had in that game. Week 1, Cowboys, go to NFL Jesus. Deshaun Watson threw the ball 45 times, which is a lot.
Yeah. What do you have, like 4 or 5 sacks?
The Cowboys had 6 sacks in that game. 2 for Eric Kendricks, 1 for DeMario Overshawn, 2 for DeMarcus Lawrence.
Yeah.
1 for Micah Parsons. But Micah Parsons had 5 QB hits, also a tackle for loss, also a pass defensed.
Yeah, he was all up in that.
Eric Kendricks had 2 sacks and 2 QB hits. DeMarcus Lawrence had 4 QB hits. And so I don't know how the Saints are going to approach this. It's going to require some interesting decision making, but that's going to be, to me, we're going to talk about X factors in the final segment. I don't know how you can look at anything but, okay, if Derek Carr gets eaten alive in the backfield, you're going to be in trouble. And so, a lot of it's going to come down to whether you can, that DA understanding of how to stop Dak Prescott can continue. But with that in mind, let's hear from Ed Werder. we weren't able to book anyone on this episode to kind of break down the Cowboys, but he is the Cowboys insider for WFAA. He's no longer with ESPN, but he did have some good info on the Cowboys. So we chatted with Mike Detillier and Bobby Hebert earlier this week. So let's take a listen.
And I was surprised, boy, to go hostile territory. You're on the road against the Cleveland Browns, number one defense last year.
The score was no indication of the dominance of that game by the Cowboys.
And Deshaun Watson, I mean, Dak Prescott's living up to his contract, and I think he will do that going forward. Deshaun Watson stealing money. I mean, what's up with that cat? But I look at Dallas where they're at right now, and kind of like the Saints, but we would be, I guess, lesser of Dallas, where we're under the radar from a national perspective. But until Dallas does something in the playoffs, you might say, okay, whatever they do in the regular season, we got to see it in the postseason. That's just the way we treat Dallas right now, considering when you go 3 straight seasons and you win 12 games, they want to wait and see what you could do in the postseason.
Yeah, they've won 12 games 3 years in a row. Mike McCarthy is the only coach to do that in Dallas. And, of course, as you suggested, they've had no success in the postseason. They have been 1-3 under Mike McCarthy, who was hired as a former Super Bowl winning coach in Green Bay by a team in Dallas that believes they were still in their Super Bowl window. But despite all of the regular season success, it has not manifested itself in the postseason. In fact, they've lost 2 of their 3 last 3 home playoff games without ever even leading. And last year, they were the only undefeated team in the NFL at home. They're matched up against the Green Bay Packers in Jordan Love's first postseason appearance, the youngest football team to make the playoffs, and the Cowboys get down 27-0 and never really compete. The season ends and created all kinds of speculation about Mike McCarthy, who's now working on the final year of his contract. They got Dak Prescott's contract resolved yesterday, about 3 hours before kickoff. But Mike McCarthy and almost all of his coaching staff, including Mike Zimmer, the defensive coordinator, are in the final year of their deals.
And Ed, explain to me, because you look at Jerry Jones, he's going to do what he wants to do. But I guess it's to be relevant, 12 months out of the year. But why the timing? I'm looking at 2 weeks prior to Prescott, that all of a sudden you give CeeDee Lamb a 4-year contract, $136 million, and then basically, like you said, the day of the game, 4 years, $240 million for Dak Prescott. Is that just to get the headlines, or what is that approach that Jerry Jones doing when you have those significant contracts like you had with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott?
Well, they've been very good, Bobby, at drafting and developing players, and I think they're capable of identifying their foundational players. They just have not been proactive in terms of securing long-term contracts with these players early enough to get them at below market prices. And that Ezekiel Elliott held out on him, became the highest paid running back in football a couple of years ago. Zach Martin held out last training camp, and now CeeDee Lamb holds out. And the market was really set once Justin Jefferson signed. They should have gotten that deal done sooner. The Dak Prescott deal, I think, he had all the leverage. He endured 2 franchise tags, which the Cowboys have never applied to any other quarterback in their history. Came in as a 4th-round pick, won right away, replacing Tony Romo when he was injured, and has been the starting quarterback going on now his 9th season. And it just doesn't make sense. And Stephen Jones would admit that they should have gotten the first Dak Prescott deal done a year sooner than they did, and they might never have put themselves in the position they did, which was when they went into this negotiation, arguably no player in the history of the NFL has had more leverage against the team than Prescott had, because he was in a position where he could walk away and they couldn't stop him. He had a no franchise tag, no trade clause. So the Cowboys faced the possibility going into yesterday's game of this being the last of, he's going to make 17 starts and then he's going to leave if he wants for a better offer. And there was nothing the Joneses could do to keep him there. So they wisely gave him this record-setting contract to make sure that he remained in Dallas.
Now, Ed, what is your take on this? Because these are household names. You look, okay, what are you doing defensively? Because everyone follows the football. But you look from a defensive perspective with Dallas. When you look at like Dan Quinn and now Mike Zimmer, my understanding they can return their traditional 4-3 defense. And I'm a Mike Zimmer fan. And I think he'll help him be better against the run. Because that's where I think Dallas at times got gashed. When you look at that compared to maybe what Dan Quinn was willing to do. Just elaborate on that. What do you think they brought to the table like Dan Quinn versus Mike Zimmer? They both know what they're doing, but I think under Mike Zimmer, Dallas might play the run a little better, obviously.
Yeah. Dan Quinn took over a defense that was historically bad under Mike Nolan, who was fired after one season as Mike McCarthy's first defensive coordinator. And Dan Quinn turned this into a defense that was a pressure defense, created a lot of turnovers, led the NFL in defensive touchdowns and takeaways over the 3-year period. But once they lost Leighton Vander Esch at linebacker last year, he was confident or content to fill in with, safeties playing linebacker. They got awfully small physically, and that made them susceptible to the run game, which was exposed by Green Bay in the playoffs, by the 49ers in the regular season, by Buffalo in the regular season. And so once Dan Quinn left to become the head coach of the Washington Commanders, the Cowboys went with somebody that was familiar both to Cowboys ownership. Mike Zimmer spent a lot of time in Dallas working with Bill Parcells. In fact, Mike McCarthy's the 5th head coach he's worked for. He also has familiarity with Mike McCarthy because he coached against him when he was at Minnesota. McCarthy was at Green Bay. And when McCarthy's a play caller, he likes to have on the defensive side of the ball a former head coach, and Zimmer provides that. And you're right. The absolute thing they want to accomplish is they want to be better stopping the run. Yesterday, they were surprised Cleveland didn't run the ball more at them. They didn't have their starting tackles. They didn't have their Nick Chubb, their running back. But the Cowboys still expected to be tested more in the run game than they were. Maybe New Orleans will do it. New Orleans plays the San Francisco scheme, and that was really a problem for Dan Quinn, and Mike Zimmer's handled that scheme better. So we'll see how that goes on Sunday.
Ed, before we let you run, this is domination. I'm looking at halftime. You're on the road. The Browns trailed by 17 points. They just had one first down, and they were outgained 216 to 54 yards. That was shocking.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Deshaun Watson, when he was with the Texans, he was one of the best young quarterbacks in football. In fact, I think you could make a fair argument. When they were winning division titles, he led the NFL in passing. He was one of the top 5 quarterbacks in football. And then, he had the situation that resulted in him being suspended and ultimately traded for far too much, and he's produced far too little. He's only made 13 starts in 2 years, 2+ years now for the Browns, and he just doesn't look physically like the same player.
But yeah, thanks to Ed for coming on. And again, I got completely forgotten he's not at ESPN anymore. So when I saw his name, I was like, is that the same Ed Werder? Or is there just another Ed Werder out there? Nope, it's that guy. But that's the wild thing about the Cowboys is you kind of look at them as this kind of failure of a franchise in the sense that their expectation is Super Bowl, and they haven't done it in so long. Like, it's got to be exhausting to be a coach of that team and know, like, man, we've won 12 games each of the last 3 years, and every year they're talking about firing me.
Oh, for sure, right.
Can you imagine the conversation if DA won 12 games 3 years in a row? Like, we'd be like, holy crap.
I will say this for Cowboys fans, at least they are just blindly loyal to the squad. And it seems like every year they legitimately think every year is their year. Whereas we've felt that negativity too much this season going into the Saints year.
Well, you're coming off a 12-win season. You should feel like it's your year. You should, and that's why every year you go into the playoffs and you lose.
And you're bounced, right?
Man, especially last year. Like, it's easy to kind of get lost in like, okay, yeah, you're losing a playoff game, you shouldn't fire the coach. But when you lose it the way they did, especially, the Cowboys have the longest home winning streak in the NFL right now. They've won 16 consecutive regular season games at home. They were the only team in the NFL that didn't lose a home game last year. They have the 4th longest home winning streak dating back to 2000. I think that was what the NFL sent out this week. I don't have it in front of me, but the other 4 teams on that list are the Patriots. They did it 4 different times. And so that's why, like, it's like you go into a home playoff game against the Packers, and it's like you got to be feeling immensely confident. You got to be feeling like, wow, this is a perfect scenario for us. And then you not only lose, you get trucked at home in the playoffs. That's got to be embarrassing. But what I will say, and Ed kind of talked about this, and a lot of people have talked about this. I heard Dan Orlovsky talking about this. As everyone heaped praise on the Saints, but then all picked the Cowboys to win that game. The scheme that the Saints are bringing in there is effectively this what's his name up in Green Bay? Jeez, the head coach in Green Bay. Oh, Matt LaFleur.
Yeah.
Like, it's a similar scheme, like the same issues that the Cowboys had defending Matt LaFleur's scheme with Green Bay. The Saints should be able to present those same challenges. And we'll see if Mike Zimmer's scheme is any different than what it was last year with Dan Quinn, and if he's able to handle it a little bit better. But it's the same players, effectively. So if you're able to identify struggle points for these players, and the scheme is only going to fix that so much. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm hopeful that the scheme is kind of a cheat code against the Cowboys, and we can kind of talk about it, because I'm worried about what that pass rush is going to do to the Saints. I really am. I don't know how to get around it. I don't know how you look at this matchup and don't see a massive mismatch in the trenches.
What would be awesome is, obviously, you see the O-line, how they perform week 1. If they can in any way, shape, or form carry that kind of confidence momentum into this one, it would be immense, because this is a huge step up, I feel, too, in obviously talent, confidence, and just an attack we saw really just abuse Deshaun Watson last week. Yeah. And what I will say for the Saints, and what I think is one of the biggest issues with Deshaun Watson, is you got to be willing to just run the play, get the ball out, and go. And that's something that we've heard from Clint Kubiak. And I think the quote he would use is like, call it and haul it. Like, you're not trying to get in the perfect play every time. You're just trying to, you want to run the ball. We had Mark Schlereth on WWL this week to kind of break down. And like, that's what he was complimentary of. It's like, at a certain point, you just got to call a play that you feel like can work against whatever they do and execute it. That's what the Saints did against the Panthers. They just, beat them over the head with a shovel. And, if you can dodge enough times, great. But a lot of times you're just going to get hit in the head with a shovel. And I want to be the guy swinging the shovel. I don't want to be the guy dodging the shovel. Right. And I don't know. That's kind of. But I feel like that's a great point, right? Like analogy, I guess. But because I'm thinking both of these defenses are going to be swinging the shovel.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we'll see. But here's a couple quotes from Derek Carr on the Cowboys defense and Micah Parsons, and I think this is going to be the story of this matchup.
So fast, he's powerful, plays extremely hard. He's one of the best players in our game. You turn on the tape and he reminds me of Von Miller all those years that me and Von were, battling, 2 times a year. He really reminds me of Von with that explosiveness, that get off, his understanding of what they're trying to do to him and those kind of things. Very, very impressive. I mean, they're just really talented. They're really good all across the board. Everyone's going to talk about 11 and 90, but I mean, they got guys inside. They have some guys, other guys outside. I mean, they got guys all over the place, and they have an amazing coach and Coach Zimmer.
Yeah, and so Trayvon Diggs is a guy that what I'll say for Derek is when he's been good, he hasn't thrown interceptions, and he hasn't really put the ball at risk. And we'll see how that goes this week, because the Cowboys are probably better than any other team at taking advantage. So it's, you talk about rushing coverage. I don't think the Cowboys are necessarily the best in coverage, but they are, I would argue, they're the best in the NFL at forcing rushed decisions.
Yeah.
And then jumping the ball. Like, that's why you see Deron Bland, Trayvon Diggs with all these interceptions. They're not the best cover corners in the NFL, but they are probably the best at reading the ball and taking it away when the quarterback doesn't have time to attack them in coverage. And like, there's a difference there in terms of, like, I think Marshawn Lattimore is a great cover corner, but I don't know if he's the best at identifying and attacking a ball in the air. Whereas that's what they do better than anyone. So that's kind of that X factor, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. But like, when you can't pass protect as well as you want, the ball has to come out a tick early, and the defense is making a play on it, tipping the ball up, causing havoc. That's where this game is gonna. I need Derek more so than a lot of other weeks to really focus on that part of like getting the ball out quick, keeping the ball safe. Because you can win a low-scoring game here against the Cowboys. Like we've seen it happen. Now, can you win a game in the 30s against the Cowboys when you can't drop back and pass the way you probably want to? I don't know. So that's what we're going to see.
No, the O-line is still the story for this team. You know, the question was obviously into the season and training camp, what we were all talking about. They had a heck of a performance against the Panthers, but we've said it's like a step up now. You kind of had like another extra preseason game there week 1, except you got all the starters to remain in for the entire game. Right. So everybody got some more reps and more experience, a little more confidence for week 2. But yeah, going on the road against, I won't say they're a juggernaut, but they definitely have a ton of talent on this squad. And they've proven they can perform in the regular season. So definitely got to be wary of the Cowboys.
They're a regular season juggernaut, no question.
Yeah, right.
That's exactly what they are, is a regular. Now, if this was the playoffs, I don't know. But in a regular season, they have shown they can beat anybody. And so we'll have to see. But all right, let's wrap up that segment. We're going to come back. We're going to pick some X factors, offense, defense, special teams, dive into that. You know, what we think could swing this matchup and go from there. This is Inside Black and Gold. Again, this is kind of a all over the place episode, as has been the case in Louisiana. We've all been all over the place with this freaking hurricane. Hopefully it's the last one we deal with this year. Thankfully it's in September, so it's not as hot.
We should have made this a bourbon cast this morning.
Oh yeah, I got a lot to do, Steve. I can't always get drunk in the morning. It's only on Wednesdays and Fridays.
I was just keeping theme with the hurricane, you know.
And it is Friday, so I guess this is my get drunk in the morning day. But all right, let's wrap it up. We'll come back, break down some X factors. Who dat? Let's do it. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. We are getting ready for Saints-Cowboys. Now, week 2 is always the question of like, okay, do you believe what happened in week 1, or was it a mirage, or was it whatever? And I feel like a lot of people are in a holding pattern around the Saints right now because they do not want to admit that they might have seen a team that finally figured out its offense. And they're going to be like, nah, the Panthers are just terrible and nothing matters. We'll see how true that is. And I think this is a week that even if you go out and play the Cowboys close, you're gonna win a lot of people over. If you get blown out, then I
told you.
Yes, the take is going to be they are who we thought they were, and you know, and I don't think that's necessarily fair for a lot of the reasons we're going to break down. But the first X factor, and that I'm going to hit here, and this is what we're going to go through in this segment, and I'm gonna quote Ricky Bobby here and say I want to go fast, and that's what DA said about this offense, and I think like a lot of people want to clown DA for everything he says. I actually think this is a really good take on like why that offense seemed to work. And it was like, that offense looked fast. Like the Saints offense ran fast. It operated fast. It got the ball to fast people. And, you know, you were able to take advantage of that. And I think for this team, and you look at the Dolphins and you say the same thing, although the Dolphins, I think the winds are going to change on Mike McDaniel pretty soon if things don't turn around down there. Right. Especially without Tua. I think the idea of like who Mike McDaniel is and that kind of nerdiness that he embodies, it's going to get old real fast if they end up 1-5, which I think is very reasonable if you're without Tua for an extended period. But like, that's what they've been able to do, is they've been able to leverage fast players in fast situations, get the ball out of the quarterback's hands and let the athletes make plays in space. And that's what, if the Saints have success in this matchup, that's what you're going to be able to do. You're going to be able to run the ball. You're going to be able to get the ball into the hands of Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and make plays in space. But I do think like that's what, when you look at this offense, why did it feel so much better than what we've seen? It's because for the last few years, I felt like the Saints are the slowest team in the NFL. And when you're relying on Michael Thomas, maybe that's part of that, because he was never a burner. He was always a guy that was just going to battle for balls and you were going to out execute. It's nice to be the team that can just run away from people. And I think that's what, if this offense can have success against Dallas, it's going to be that. It's going to be, we don't have to sit back and pass protect for 3 seconds to get the ball out, because we can get the receivers the ball in space quickly on screens, on bubbles, on whatever, and let them do the work. And that's going to frustrate the hell out of a pass rush if they win, which they're going to be winning a lot. And by the time they get to the quarterback, the ball's already gone. That's my big X factor.
A thing from week 1, 2, I was impressed with the Saints offense was how soon things were clicking with the new scheme and Clint Kubiak. And it seems that, I don't know, maybe it is the verbiage that things just translate a lot better to these guys, because it was definitely less clunky than last season where Pete Carmichael felt like a whole hell of a mess. And this, it definitely was very smooth, precise. And like you said, that the speed of it, it just seemed to move a lot better.
Yeah, it looked like it all made sense. And I think that's kind of the, in the preseason, Alvin Kamara said everything's intentional. That's what he liked about it. You could see that. Like you could understand, like you could watch it and feel like the players understood why they were doing things the way they were doing, right? Whether it was the blocking, whether it was the offensive line kind of getting downfield on, pulling around. Like there was one play that, Trevor Penning, he kind of just like pulled around and got downfield on like a screen pass. And like Clowney just seemed to have like no idea what the hell was going on. And it's like, it's nice to be on the other side of that equation for once, where the offense is doing something and the defense is confused, and I don't know, like, it's just nice to see. Now at the end of the day, one of the biggest X factors for this game is going to be health for the Saints. And that's what's frustrating is, we talk about, okay, there's a holding pattern. There's this idea that the Saints have to continue to prove that they are not as bad as people thought they were. And this game is going to be a big part of that. And they're going into a place where no opponent has won a regular season game since 2022, I guess I should say. And you're looking at being without, potentially, left tackle Taliesin Fuaga, we haven't really talked about yet, and cornerback Marshawn Lattimore. Now, Lattimore, I think, has a better chance to play in terms of, like, I think when a veteran player misses the first 2 days of the week of practice, if he can get back on Friday, which we're recording this before Friday's practice, so this could all change. Best case scenario, both guys are questionable. And I think that's probably the case, even if you're fairly confident that a guy like Fuaga isn't going to play. He's dealing with a back issue. Because you're not going to give them the benefit of knowing, like, hey, prepare for Landon Young if you can avoid it. But when you're downgraded the way that Taliesin was, he was limited on Wednesday, downgraded to DMP on Thursday. That's not a good sign.
I'm hoping, and I know this is usually not the case. They were just like, all right, he was able to do a limited run on Wednesday. Let's just give him off Thursday and we'll throw him back in the mix Friday and see what happens. But that's pure speculation and hoping right there. You're hopeful, but at the same time, it's also frustrating because when you're a young player, you need those practice reps are way more important for young players than, like, say, like, when it was Ryan, you'd be like, okay, you got it right. You've done this for so long. You could show up on Friday and we feel comfortable throwing you out there. It's just like, I think you probably will if he can go, but who's to say that he's 100%? Who's to say that he's ready? This is one of the most difficult matchups you will get all season. And this is if I had to pick one game all year where I was like, okay, we have to have him, we have to have our rookie left tackle miss a couple days because of a back issue, and then he's probably be playing at like 80%. Like we saw, like if you watch the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football, like that wasn't really about the Dolphins not having any idea what to do. That was about the left side of their offensive line being in shambles. And the Bills were just able to eat Tua for lunch, and hopefully Tua, it's, gosh, how many head injuries are you going to allow a guy to have? And you mentioned that left side of the Dolphins O-line. Tyrann left that game. Yeah, Tyrann right. And that was when things really went badly. Right. Tyrann was out. Like that pick six that Tua threw, he's getting pressure off the left side because Tyrann has to go out, and suddenly he makes the dumbest decision I've ever seen in my life, trying to throw a ball away on third down when you're punting anyway. Like, and it ends up being a pick six. Like, you're trying to save 5 yards there? Like, what the hell? Anyway, and they kept flashing over to Mike McDaniel, and he just looked like he just put his vape away. But, man, that's a rough look. But no, like that's like when you lose key players in your offensive line, you'll watch a game and you'll be like, I don't feel like this team could ever win. Like, I don't feel like this team has a chance to win. Even though you mentioned speed and then obviously talent on that Miami's Dolphins side. I mean, Tyreek Hill didn't have a good game. Neither did Waddle. Achane had a pretty good outing, but other than that, like the passing game was just abysmal. Well, the problem was they, Tua threw the interceptions in the first half, and when you are under, like, that's the thing. Like, you got to keep that game low scoring if your offensive line is not where it needs to be. And when they got down 3 scores in the second half, they didn't have a chance. It was over. It was over. And you end up in situations where your quarterback feels like he has to make a play.
on fourth down. He can't slide and protect himself. He still should have slid and protect himself. Like, that's the thing with Tua. Like, you've had all these head issues, these head injuries, and you're still not protecting yourself in that situation. Like, and it was DeMar Hamlin who made the hit of all the people.
Right. And you know what? I don't think many players are. Tua should be wearing a Guardian helmet.
Crazy.
Right.
I don't think there's a single team that's actually wearing them, and they can wear them.
Right. I think I saw an article that was like, there's one player in the entire NFL that wore one for a game so far.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that, but it looks goofy. But at the end of the day, like, okay, Tua, how important is your career to you?
Yeah.
How important is your career, Tua? Sorry, couldn't help myself.
At least you didn't do the Hawk Tua.
Oh God, so many fantasy team names that so many people drafted Tua Tagovailoa and TJ Hawkinson just for that.
Right.
It's so funny. It's like the same reason I draft Taysom Hill every year so I can keep Salt Lake Gritty as my team name. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's going to be a factor for the Saints. Is like, you know, if the left side of the line can't block. And that's the funny thing is, like, I don't even know. So if you don't have Landon Young out there, I'm sorry, if you don't have Fuaga out there and you have to go with Landon Young, it almost makes me more concerned on the right side than the left side, because what you're going to end up doing is scheming a bunch of extra help for Landon on the left side. And I'm just assuming it's going to be Landon Young. I don't know who else it would be. Oli Udoh hasn't really played left tackle in camp, so I think you would go with Landon.
And you still also have Lucas Patrick is banged up too.
He is, but he did get back to practice on Thursday, so we'll see. Nick Saldiveri, I would guess, would be the starting guy if Lucas can't go.
Right.
And now, so that would mean that, you know, the left side of your line is a question mark one way or the other. And so here's the thing, you know, everyone's kind of all grown a little bit less of not annoyed with Trevor Penning on the right side. Now, here's the thing. If Landon Young is on the left side and you got to help him and you got to send extra help his way, then you're leaving Trevor Penning on an island against someone he's not suited to be on an island against. I don't care who it is, whether it's DeMarcus Lawrence, whether it's Micah Parsons, whether it's Marshawn Nealand, like whether I don't know, but this is what we could end up going into. You know, it's funny because there's a scenario where we go out of this game and say Trevor Penning was the problem in that game. And it's really not even going to be about Trevor. It's going to be about, if you had told me at any point you were going to leave Trevor to his own devices against that Dallas offensive line or defensive line, I was going to tell you that we're going to have a really hard time. So this game more than ever, like we want to crown Clint Kubiak as the savior of this offense. Well, okay, this is going to be the game. If you can do it in this game, if you can figure out a way to protect that offensive line in this game, then I will, we'll all kiss his feet, because
they need to go back and implement that one game when Tom Brady was like getting the ball out in like 1.8 seconds.
No, well, I mean, we talked about it earlier this season. Like, one of the ways that I think this offense with Derek Carr can be successful is to operate a lot more like late career Tom Brady.
Yeah, just get rid of it.
And this is the matchup. This is the exact situation where it's like, this is where you need to do that, right? Like, it's going to be frustrating at points. You're going to punt because you're going to end up in 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, and you're going to be throwing it through to the sticks. You got to be willing to do it, because like if you don't, you're going to end up in situations where the quarterback's going to get hurt. Look at the Dolphins. The quarterback's going to get hurt. You're going to end up turning the ball over. Like, you got to survive in advance and allow your defense to help you win this game. And we're kind of all over the place with X factors, but to me, that's the scenario. Complementary football, because you cannot go into that game and say, we trust our offensive line. No offensive line in football should say you trust yourselves against Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, all these guys. You have to be willing to let your defense help you. Let Dak help you. Put Dak in bad situations. Create scenarios where you can pin them back and force them to go the long way. I cannot continually give this team short fields. I cannot continually allow them to tee off on my quarterback. I need to make them win this game. I cannot hand them this game. And that's going to be what decides it, in my opinion.
Looking at the X factors too on offense, we talked about this Cowboys defense being big, physical. To me, I need to match some physical with physical. So I'm looking, you mentioned with Taysom Hill on your fantasy team. I need Taysom to be a big part of this offense, just because I know he can be that tough hard-nosed guy that this team's going to need against the front like the Cowboys.
Oh yeah, and I mean, you look at that Cleveland game, right? Like if they're able to run the ball, if they have Nick Chubb and they can run the ball, it's a different story. Jerome Ford, 12 carries, 44 yards. Like their yards per carry on the ground felt better than it was because Deshaun had 5 carries for 39 yards. 3.7 yards per carry, and a lot of that was late in the game, like on that kind of go to hell touchdown drive at the end. If you can run the ball, like we're talking about the pass protection, the easiest way to protect your quarterback is to not pass the ball. And
obviously it wasn't the greatest of yards per carry, but nice to see. I felt like Jamal Williams looked like a different runner this year.
Yeah, and people are going to say like, well, why I want to see more. I don't want to 3.5 yards per carry is not satisfactory to me. I'm okay with that as long as he's picking up the hard yards. Like if I'm handing him the ball, like your yards per carry is never going to be great when you're the short yardage guy, right? Like, because you're not looking for a 5-yard gain on 3rd and 1. You're looking for a 1.5-yard gain on 3rd and 1. You're looking for the yardage you need. A 1-yard run on 3rd and 1 is a successful run. It's going to hurt your yards per carry, but it's going to keep the chains moving. And that's, shorten the game, long drives. Don't force yourself to be in 3rd and long. Don't commit penalties. When you are on the road against a team with this type of defense,
I'll take 3.5 yards per carry for this game for sure.
I'll take field goals. I will take points wherever I can get them. And that's, when you win if you can win a game 12-10, no one's going to be complaining about it at the end of the day. Now, everyone's going to probably turn on Derek Carr and say, well, this is the guy that we thought we had. But
God forbid Olave has another down day.
I think this has to be an Olave game. And, there's a couple guys. So Kool-Aid McKinstry, I have we'll see if Marshawn can go.
Look good, right?
Dealing with it feels like it's one of those games where it's like, when you're talking about a hamstring injury and you're having someone go, are you risking losing him for the rest of the season by trying to rush him back? But we'll see. And like, this is why it's like, oh, why'd they draft a cornerback when they didn't have a direct path to playing? Well, this is why you did it. This is why you spent a 2nd-round pick. This is why you traded up in the 2nd round to go get a guy that you felt would be ready immediately, that you felt had that pedigree of like, if we have to play him, we feel comfortable doing it. He's going to make mistakes. He made a mistake on like his 2nd play in the game last week where he kind of bailed on his assignment and went after the quarterback scrambling. And then it's like, well, there's the guy that even Bryce can make this throw.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
For anyone panicking, oh my God, they're not going to have Marshawn in a matchup against CeeDee Lamb. Paulson Adebo is pretty damn good, so I'm not so concerned there.
Well, you'll need him to be good.
Yeah, right.
And, what I will say for the Cowboys is they don't have – I wouldn't say they have a terrifying receiving core. They have one guy that you're afraid of, right?
And the speed of Cooks, and obviously I know he wants to cook the Saints being a former first-rounder here. That'll play into it because he can be dangerous.
No, Brandon Cooks is good. I think Brandon Cooks is like a criminally underrated player, and he has been his entire career.
Right.
But like he's not a guy like if I have to say, hey, Kool-Aid, go check Brandon Cooks all day, I feel okay with it.
For sure, right.
And Alante will be a factor there because Cooks likes to run a lot out of the slot. But past that, it's not like this is a team with 4 or 5 receivers that worry you. This is a team with one receiver that might be the best in the NFL, and then a bunch of guys who can live off that. And so if I feel like I can,
and a tight end that's banged up,
and that's the frustrating part is like with Marshawn, I feel like I can take care of CeeDee Lamb with one guy and not constantly having to be rolling help his way. With Paulson, I think you're going to start that way and you'll see how it goes. And we have seen Paulson, like he's been left on an island with Mike Evans, and sometimes he handles it well, sometimes he doesn't. He did in week 17 last year. I thought he did an amazing job against Mike Evans. And so we'll see. I think that's when if you want to be a CB1, you're going to want to get paid CB1 money. This is the matchup where that's the frustrating thing is like these are the matchups where you're probably going to lose Paulson Adebo in free agency because of if he goes out and has a CB1 type day against CeeDee Lamb, you're talking about we cannot afford you, going forward. But either way, that's going to be a huge matchup. Is not okay.
For
so
sure.
Can Paulson, if Marshawn can't go, or if Marshawn is limited, can Paulson check CeeDee Lamb? Can Kool-Aid McKinstry check whoever he's lined up against? I don't know if he'll shadow. You might play sides. That's typically what they've done when Marshawn's been out there. Is you haven't shadowed. But that's just a question, and we'll see. But it's frustrating that with all the good vibes out of week 1, you go into week 2 and you suddenly have this like, oh man, hopefully this guy can play. Hopefully this guy can play. Hopefully this guy can get it done. That's frustrating.
And obviously with the O-line, we had concerns with it. Fuaga's, you've been getting rave reviews. Love to see that. And now not being able to have your top pick that you're so relying on. Yes, it's his rookie year, but you still were like, this is our anchor here now on this O-line. Not to have him's concerning. And then obviously Marshawn, you worry because we've seen the past 2 years him dealing with injuries. Training camp had the hip flexor. Now all of a sudden a hamstring. But when he is out there, he's typically one of the best guys on the field, and you want that. Yeah. Obviously, like you mentioned with CeeDee Lamb, maybe the best, but definitely in that top upper echelon of wide receivers in the NFL.
It's crazy how quickly we went from, okay, I wonder how the rookie left tackle is going to look, to be like, we can't win without our rookie left tackle.
You got to have him.
Yeah. I think if the Saints win this game, it's going to be another one of these low scoring, man, this is ugly.
It has to be.
12-10, 15-7, something like that. Brandon Aubrey, and that's the thing, like Brandon Aubrey and Blake Grupe, this could be a kind of like dueling 50-yard field goal kind of game, right? And it's maybe the first one of them to blink first is the difference. We haven't really talked about them, but I think, can Blake continue to be that guy with that? I think he can be. I'm still playing him in fantasy.
For sure. And you look at the conditions, obviously with an indoor stadium there, both guys are going to have, premium opportunities, and, obviously weather will not be a factor.
You know what I might go and bet a prop on is like 60-yard field goals. I wonder what I can get odds on, or like, is there a 60+ yard field goal made in this game? Because I think it's
interesting.
possible.
Yeah, that could be some good money.
Yeah, because like if there was ever a game where you're going to see a 60-yard field goal, it's probably this game. And I'm not even sure which guy it's going to be.
Wonder if you could put a money on if you could have multiple 60-yard field goals from either kicker.
Yeah. Well, right. It has to be an either kicker thing.
Yeah.
But all right, I think we did it. I think that is the end of this podcast. I promise in future podcasts we will have a much more, planned out agenda. This was all over.
No, man, I thought your stuff with Tyrann Mathieu was definitely the highlight. That was great stuff.
That's all I had. But yeah, we got that. You threw
the ace of spades down, though. You're good.
Yeah, I had the trump card in there early.
Right.
I didn't hold on to that one. But all right. Who dat? I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. We'll be coming at you on Monday with our post-game podcast. I'll be coming back from Dallas Sunday, so it really doesn't work from a timing perspective. But we'll be on here. Not sure if we'll be live or not. I haven't decided whether I want to do the live on Monday or Wednesday. But either way, thanks everyone who listened. Thanks everyone who subscribes, everyone who leaves comments, everyone who leaves us a rating, a review on Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. Thanks everyone who supports us, all that good stuff. We will keep bringing you these podcasts as always. Who dat? Go Saints. Beat the Cowgirls, as Mr. Abear would say.
And I love it this week, Saints fans. You're just like me, rooting for the Saints and the Eagles because they're taking on the Dirty Birds. Let's go, Philly.
At least we're not the Falcons. Peace, y'all.